Okay, so um, we're diving into this whole thing with encryption.
Right.
You shared your concerns about what happens when quantum computers get powerful enough to crack the codes that we rely on literally every single day for everything.
Yeah.
And then you found this article about these Chinese researchers using something called quantum annealing
Right.
to crack RSA encryption. And I got to say, I don't know about you, but that definitely got my attention.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. And the article you shared really highlights this like technological shift that's
Hmm.
underway, and it could change how we think about cybersecurity on like a fundamental level.
So let's back up for a second. For those of us who maybe aren't like cryptography experts,
Sure.
what exactly is RSA and why is it such a big deal if someone can crack it?
In the simplest terms, RSA is like the workhorse of online security. Like when you're logging into your bank or sending an email or even just browsing a secure website, chances are RSA is working behind the scenes to protect your information.
Okay, so it's kind of like the digital lock on all of our digital doors.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what makes RSA so powerful is that it's based on incredibly complex math, the kind that even supercomputers would struggle with. It all boils down to this. Factoring really, really big numbers is hard. Like if I gave you a number with hundreds of digits and asked you to find its two prime factors, you'd be working on it for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to begin. So, but if computers can eventually crack the code, what's even the point of RSA in the first place?
That's where it gets interesting. So even though computers are getting faster all the time, factoring these giant numbers would still take an impractically long time to like break RSA. We're talking years, decades, even centuries for the numbers that are used today. That's what makes it so secure. But quantum computers, specifically the kind being developed in this research, could potentially change that equation.
And that brings us back to quantum annealing. It sounds kind of like something straight out of Star Trek.
Sure.
What's the deal with this technology?
Okay, so think of it this way. Imagine a landscape with mountains and valleys. A regular computer tries to find the lowest point by basically wandering around in the dark, checking each spot one by one. But quantum annealing is like having a bird's eye view. You can see the entire landscape at once and instantly identify that lowest point.
So instead of trying every possibility, it takes this quantum shortcut to the answer. That's pretty wild.
Precisely. It uses these things called qubits to explore all those possible solutions simultaneously. And this makes it potentially really powerful for certain problems, including that math behind RSA encryption.
Okay.
It's about finding that like absolute best solution much, much faster than a classical computer ever could.
Okay, so back to our Chinese researchers. They've got this quantum annealing power, and they've set their sights on RSA. What did they actually manage to do?
So they figured out how to turn that whole factoring problem into an optimization problem, the kind quantum annealing is really good at. And they claimed their method sped things up significantly. We're talking like an 84% reduction in the range of values their system even had to consider.
Wow, 84%. That sounds like cracking the code in days instead of years. So is RSA done?
Well, hold on a second. While it's a huge efficiency boost, there's a catch. They were only able to factor a 22-bit RSA integer, which is a tiny number compared to what's used in real-world encryption. To give you some context, that's like 2,269,753.
Okay, so they cracked a code, but not a very impressive one.
Yeah.
Sounds like we don't need to panic about our online banking just yet.
Okay, yeah, it's more like a proof of concept at this point and shows that this technology has the potential to become a threat to RSA, as quantum computers improve. And,
Yeah.
and to be honest, they didn't just stop there. They actually used a two-pronged approach. One was this direct quantum annealing attack, but the other one was pretty clever. They used quantum annealing to boost a classical attack method called CVP.
CVP. Okay, more acronyms. What is that all about?
So imagine you're trying to find the closest point on a grid to a specific target. CVP is about finding that closest vector, basically that point. The researchers use quantum annealing to refine the results of this classical CVP algorithm, essentially making it much more efficient at zeroing in on good solutions.
So it's like giving a regular computer a turbo boost.
Exactly. And with this approach, they actually managed to factor a 50-bit integer, a step up from that 22-bit one.
Okay.
But you're right, that's still a far cry from the encryption protecting your Netflix password.
So it seems like we have some time before this becomes like a major issue. But what you're saying is current encryption methods might not be enough in the future. What happens then? Do we just wave goodbye on online security?
No, not at all. That's where post-quantum cryptography, or PQC, comes in. Think of it as like the next generation of encryption, specifically designed to withstand attacks from these more powerful quantum computers.
So while those researchers are figuring out how to break codes, other folks are already building the unbreakable codes of the future.
Yeah, exactly. And the really reassuring part is this isn't just some like pie in the sky idea. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, is heavily involved in like evaluating and standardizing PQC algorithms as we speak.
Now you're talking my language. NIST setting standards means this is serious business. But how do we know these new algorithms will actually work in the real world, not just in some lab?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's why NIST is so important in this whole process. They're rigorously testing these algorithms, making sure they're both secure and practical to actually implement. One of the leading contenders right now is an algorithm called Kyber, specifically a variant called MLChem.
MLChem. Okay, you've officially lost me with the acronyms again. What makes this one special? Why is it winning the quantum cryptography race?
Well, for starters, it's considered incredibly secure, even against the types of quantum computers we haven't even fully developed yet. But it's also practical. For example, it has relatively small key sizes compared to some other options.
Okay, break it down for me. What does key size even mean in this context, and why do we care if it's big or small?
Think of it like this. A key is basically a string of data. It's used to encrypt and decrypt information. The larger the key, the more complex the encryption, and the harder it is to crack. But large keys also require more computing power and memory, which can slow things down. So finding that sweet spot between security and efficiency is key, no pun intended.
So smaller key size, better performance. Where does this MLChem thing stack up?
Well, for a level of security comparable to what we use today with RSA, you're looking at an 800-byte public key for MLChem.
800 bytes. I can't even picture how big that is. How does that compare to the keys we use for, say, our good old RSA?
To give you a comparison, a standard ECC method, which is based on elliptic curves and commonly used today, might have a public key size of around 65 bytes.
Okay, so it's a bit bigger. But you said it's manageable?
Yes, absolutely. And remember, this is for a level of security that's designed to withstand attacks, even from those super powerful, still in development quantum computers.
So a small price to pay for peace of mind, right? But what about speed? Does this mean like everything online is going to slow to a crawl if we switch to these quantum-resistant algorithms?
That's a common concern. But the performance of these new algorithms is actually quite impressive, while not as fast as current methods. MLChem, for example, performs very well on standard processors.
So you're saying my computer won't burst into flames trying to handle this new encryption?
Not at all. On an ARM processor, which you'll find in loads of devices. Key generation with MLChem takes a bit longer than current methods, but it's still incredibly fast. We're talking about something like 460,000 cycles, which might sound like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a tiny blip.
That's reassuring to hear. It sounds like researchers are working hard to ensure this transition to a quantum-resistant future is as smooth as possible.
Absolutely. While the idea of quantum computers cracking our codes might seem scary, the reality is that we have time to prepare. And most importantly, we're not just sitting ducks. There are incredibly bright minds developing solutions to keep our information secure, even in the face of these evolving threats.
So instead of panicking about Q-Day, as some like to call it, we should be focusing on staying informed and making smart choices about our digital security.
Exactly. This deep dive is a perfect example. You had a question, you did your research, and now you're armed with the knowledge to understand the issue and make informed decisions. That's what it's all about.
Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. And when it comes to the quantum future, a little bit of knowledge can go a long way.
Speaking of which, we kind of skimmed over some pretty fascinating details about how those Chinese researchers actually implemented their attack on D-Wave's system. They used what they called a hybrid approach. What is that all about? So they were talking about a hybrid approach. What does that even mean?
So it's actually a really clever strategy. Basically, they combined the strengths of classical computing with the unique abilities of quantum annealing.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example. How did they actually use this hybrid approach?
Okay, so remember that CVP method we talked about, like finding the closest point on a grid? Well, the researchers used a standard algorithm, a classical one, to get kind of like an initial solution, like a decent starting point, And then they handed it off to D-Wave's quantum annealing system to like fine-tune the results. It's like if you were using a magnifying glass to find the right page in a book and then switching to a high-powered microscope to analyze the ink.
Ah, so the quantum computer wasn't doing all the work. It was more like a specialist tool.
Exactly. And that's like an important takeaway as we think about the future. Quantum computers aren't going to magically replace everything overnight. This hybrid approach where we use like the best tool for each part of a problem, that's likely going to be huge in the coming years.
So a little bit of teamwork between the old and the new. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And it opens up some really exciting possibilities. As quantum computers continue to improve, we can expect to see even more creative and powerful hybrid algorithms emerge.
That's pretty mind-blowing. When we started this deep dive, I was kind of worried about all my data being at risk. But now I'm honestly more excited about the potential of this technology.
I love to hear that. Yeah, it's all about perspective. Quantum computing brings challenges for sure, but the potential benefits are enormous. And by like understanding these issues, staying informed like you have, we can all help shape a future where this technology is used for good.
Well said. And for our listeners out there, I hope this deep dive has been as eye-opening for you as it has been for me. We've gone from wait, quantum what? To, okay, I get it, and the future is bright.
Absolutely. And remember, this is just the beginning. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and who knows what amazing discoveries await.
Yeah, if this deep dive sparked your curiosity, remember there's a whole world of information out there. We just kind of scratched the surface of quantum computing and encryption. For example, we focused on D-Wave's approach, well, the quantum annealing. But there are other types of quantum computers out there, those gate-based systems with even more potential power. What does their development mean for encryption? Could they crack the codes even faster? Those are questions worth pondering. So keep exploring, keep learning, and join us next time for another deep dive.